What is up, guys? My name is the Austinator, and this is my rewrite of Man of Steel. Now, I hope you guys enjoy it. This took me a little bit of time to make. I had the idea down, but I never was able to get my ideas out fully. But thankfully, hopefully, I hope you got it was able to happen. So I hope you guys enjoy what you're about to see, and I hope you guys, tell me what you think about it, because this is a pet project of mine, is to rewrite the entire DCEU, to fix it, and to show you what I would do with it. So sit back, relax, and enjoy my DCEU rewrite of Man of Steel. And we will begin the film on Krypton, because Krypton is a big part of Superman's story, just as big as his time on Earth, because Superman came from Krypton. And during this portion of the movie, I want to see, how their people really were. And I want to learn about their technology. I want to learn about, just their civilization. I want to learn how their planet, ticked before it exploded, because that's one thing that the movie original Man of Steel didn't do, was that it never went too in depth with Krypton. So it would be nice to go more in depth with it and to just learn more. And of course, you see Jor-El and you see Superman's mom. They've just had Clark at this point. He's still a baby, and they find out that Krypton's going to explode because something happens. I don't really know the specifics, but just say that Krypton is going to be destroyed, and everyone doesn't believe him, of course, because they think that they're crazy, because it's never going to happen. They're too advanced. But once Krypton starts to be destroyed, they of course send Kal-El in the pod, and of course Krypton explodes, resulting in Kal-El, being the sole survivor of Krypton, or so we think, wink wink. And of course the pod crash lands to Earth, where Kal-El is taken by the Kents, where he is raised, from infancy to basically a kid to teenager. And the thing that I would do in this movie is, instead of it being shown through flashbacks, I want this being the entire film, where we see Clark grow. I mean, Clark, to me as a kid, would be a dork, because that's who Clark Kent is. He's a dork. I mean, he wears glasses, he's a nerd, and he's an outcast because of his powers. He, because his powers are starting to act up, he's alienated by everybody because they think he's a weirdo. Like, they don't know he has superpowers because he conceals them well enough, but they think he's just a weirdo. Like, take for example, he freaks out because he sees, people skeletons with his X-ray vision, and he freaks out because he doesn't know what's going on. He doesn't know how to control his powers, and so one night his parents tell him that he's actually from Krypton, and they found him in a pod. And of course, Clark is upset by this because his parents lied to him, but at the same time, he's conflicted because he doesn't know who he wants to be. He doesn't know if he wants to be just a normal person, or a superhero, essentially. And of course, they don't pressure him, and the parent and Martha and Jonathan, they want Clark to be normal. They want him to just be living out on the farm for quite a long time. So to me, it would make more sense for them to be a little bit more protective of Clark, especially around this time. And so, of course, they're overprotective of him. They want to make sure that he's not harming anybody. And then, once he's fully grown, at least close to adulthood, Jonathan gets sick. Like, he gets deathly ill, meaning like he's gonna die. And finally, we see Clark as an adult, and by this point, he has some sort of control of his powers. And his dad's basically on his deathbed, essentially, and he tells him that he cares for him, that he loves Clark, and he wants what's best for him, even though he's not really his father. And of course, they have a good relationship, Clark, with his parents. And of course, his death hits Clark hard because this kind of gives Clark the notion like he wants to try to save everyone. Because Clark, to me, would be that stubborn guy where he's like, listen, I want to save everybody because I wasn't able to save my dad. I'm going to make sure this doesn't happen to anybody, essentially. And you're going to have to also have that tender moment between Clark and his mom where the mom's going to be like, I can't keep you here anymore. I understand that you don't want to be here, essentially. Because Clark, at this point, he knows he doesn't want to be a farmer. He wants to do something more with his life, but at the same time, he doesn't know what exactly. And so she essentially lets him go. Like Martha lets Clark go and lets him do his own thing finally. And so eventually Clark moves into Metropolis and he ends up getting a job at the Daily Planet because, of he's kind of smart and he's also had a good education and he's obviously going to have some good ties to people. And obviously when he comes in, he meets Perry White, he meets Jimmy Olsen, and he meets Lois Lane. And at this point, Clark has a crush on Lois when he meets her because he loves her personality, while at the same time she's beautiful, fierce, determined. Like she has all those great qualities anybody would want. And of course, Lois at first kind of brushes him off because it's like, well, this guy's kind of a dork, and also he's kind of nerdy, not her type. And of course, Jimmy befriends Clark easily. Perry's Perry, so he's kind of a dick. But you know what? He's like that dick where he's just more professional about it in that sense. So Clark's getting acquainted with people, and then we get introduced to Lex Luthor, where Lex is essentially a rich and pompous douche, where he's kind of paranoid about extraterrestrial life, where he believes that they're here on Earth. And of course, he's a billionaire, and people believe that, well, he's crazy because they never seen aliens before. But Lex is like, no, I'm sure it's real. And, Lex at first didn't really believe this either. But then a couple of years beforehand, there is this this ship, which is revealed to be the Kryptonian ship from BVS, which ends up crash landing to Earth at some point. And there's no one there. Of course, the people that were in the ship are dead. And Lex finds out, and he wants to cover it all up because if the public gets wind of this, then it's gonna be it's gonna be chaos. So Lex is just like, look, and he also wants to take advantage of its technology because it's Lex Luthor, and he wants to make a shit ton of money as well. But he's also realizing, like, oh my god, there's extraterrestrial life, like there's aliens here. And he wants to be able to protect people because he has this fear of aliens and that they're going to take over the world. So he has that kind of pre-notioned idea that they're going to do that without realizing that there could be aliens living among them. Also, there's also that idea where Lex he's just paranoid and he also wants the attention to himself kind of thing. So if there is aliens there, the attention is no longer going to be on him. So he definitely doesn't want that either. And of course, Clark's first assignment is that he's going to be interviewing Lex Luthor. And of course, it's like Lex is being a pompous douche and, Clark's like asking questions. And of course, Clark's going to be awkward the first time around because he doesn't know anything essentially about reporting at this time. So he's, trying to give the interview to Lex. And of course, it doesn't go very well. And, Clark's about to leave, but that's when his super hearing kicks in. And Lex says, hey, I'm going to head to the Kryptonian ship for something. And not the Kryptonian ship, but the alien ship, Clark starts to get suspicious about this because it's an alien ship, not necessarily. And he feels like it could kind of be like the same as the ship that he came down to Earth on. So Clark gets suspicious about this and he sneaks into the alien ship, which is revealed to be, of course, the Kryptonian ship. And you see a bunch of suits like you saw in the Snyder Cut. And, Clark is just like confused because he doesn't know what this is and why are all these suits coming to him. And then that's where he meets the hologram of Jor-El, which is only accessed because Clark was in the ship. And Jor-El, tells Clark that, look, you're not, of course, telling him exactly what Jonathan told him, but more in detail about where he came from. Like, he came from Krypton, and Krypton was his home world, and that he's the last person that came from there. And, like, he kind of goes into small detail about what Krypton actually was. And Clark's like, I don't know what to do, because he's also kind of lost. Because throughout this movie, Clark is trying to find his own identity, which, of course, he doesn't have one at this time. So Jor-El basically tells him that, listen, you can be whatever you want to be, but you came to Earth for a reason. Kind of like the same speech that Jonathan gives him, but kind of more like in the sense where Jor-El's like, you are meant to be greater than just a normal human being. You're you. All right, you're Kal-El. You're not just some normal guy. You're the last son of Krypton. You are essentially Earth's savior now, and that you have to be greater, and you have to make sure that whatever happened to Krypton doesn't happen to Earth. And that's when, Clark sees the classic red and blue suit with the cape, and that's when we see the first glimpse of Superman. Now, of course, he's not Superman yet, and of Superman, you don't want him to do a lot of big shit right out of the gate. In fact, you want him doing simple stuff. Like, in fact, you could just have Superman save cats at first. Be a Boy Scout, because let's face it, Superman's a dork. That's why we all love him. He's a dork. Have him save cats. Have him cross the street. With an old lady. Help her out, or and then maybe stop some robberies, of course. And he's like saving people. And maybe gradually throughout the film, maybe have him do other stuff. Like maybe have him stop a burning building with his freeze breath. Have Clark, Superman, maybe use like his heat vision to, cut through some metal to save people and lifting heavy objects. And so during one of these, escapades, he saves his kid, and the kid's like, "Thank you. What's your name?" And Clark's like, "Well, I don't have a name." And the kid's like, "Well, what's that symbol? What does the S stand for?" And then, of course, Clark's going to be like, "Well, I don't, it's kind of like the symbol of my people, like the symbol of his family." And the kid's like, "Well, I always thought the S stood for super." And then that's when he's officially known as Superman. And, Lois catches wind of this, and she's like, "I want to interview this Superman." And Clark is like, "You know what? To get brownie points for you, Lois, I'll get you that interview." And so Lois ends up meeting with Superman, and she gives him the interview, and Lois has this huge crush on Superman. And that's where it's kind of like that conflict where, Clark Kent wants to pursue a relationship with Lois, whereas Lois doesn't pay attention to him, whereas she's in love with Superman, Clark's alter ego. So it kind of leaves that conflict there. And by this point, she is warming up to Clark a little bit, but she's not necessarily like friends with them, but she's friends to where like they're colleagues. So you get that little part. And of course, Superman takes her flying because, he's Superman, of course, because he's a dork. He's a nerd. Of course he would do that. He does that. He takes her back. And, throughout this, Lex, on the Kryptonian ship learns about kryptonite, which is revealed to be like the pieces of Krypton. And he finds out about Krypton and kryptonite. And, he uses the kryptonite on one of the Kryptonian bodies that are there. And it's revealed that it can harm Kryptonians. And so Lex, of course, by this point would also find out about Superman. And he's like, I got to make sure I take Superman out before like he takes over the world. And then that's when he builds Metallo, which like his look will basically be like a robot, but he will have like the kryptonite in his chest or in his stomach, depending on what kind of metal you think. But I'd rather it just be a robot with metal that's kind of like strong enough to withstand strikes from Superman. So he builds Metallo, and Superman ends up facing Metallo at some point during the film, and it's a slug house. Like it's it's a fight because Metallo has the kryptonite and Superman's struggling because he's so weak, he doesn't know why. And of course, this causes like destruction around the city because they're flying through buildings, they're punching through stuff. It's insane. It's like it's not necessarily as bad as Man of Steel, but there's a little bit of damage there because of course nothing's gonna come unscathed. And so Lois's subplot is Lois is interviewing Lex and she's investigating him because she's suspicious of Lex and LexCorp and how it could be corrupt and how like Lex is hiding stuff from the public. Like she ends up finding out about the ship, but she only knows this because again, it's one of those things where she finds out through like maybe she bugs, not necessarily bugs phone, but she overhears a conversation as she confronts Lex about it, but Lex denies it, and she ends up getting kidnapped because if Lois goes to the public with this, his career could be over. So he gets her kidnapped, and actually, while this is happening, Superman is saving people throughout the fight with Metallo because again, Superman's going to put people first, going back to him trying to save people from saving everybody because of Jonathan. Like he wants to make sure people don't die on his watch, and so like he's grabbing rubble off people, like he's making sure it doesn't fall on them, like he's bringing them to safety throughout the fight, and then he overhears Lois getting obviously being kidnapped, and he saves her by when he takes out the criminals, and he saves her. And then he resumes his fight with Metallo. And again, kind of like before, he's saving people while this is happening. And there is some, like, he is bleeding a little bit, but not a whole lot. Like, I would say maybe he's bleeding, from his lip. So that way it's like, it's not necessarily huge damage, but like, he's got a little bit of blood on his lip. And eventually, Superman ends up defeating Metallo, and there's blood on him. And then, he ends up confronting Lex Luthor because Lois ends up telling Superman before he ends up going back to face Metallo that Lex was the one that got her kidnapped. And so he confronts Lex, and Lex is like, I didn't do anything. There's no evidence that I did. And Superman, because in reality, like, Lex planned it out to where he can't be blamed for it by, making sure that the thugs that kidnapped Lois didn't know who he was. And so Clark's like, well, I'll be sure to stop you once I get proof. And Lex is like, what proof? I ain't, I'm innocent in all this. You're the criminal for confronting me. And then Superman ends up flying away, and Lex is like, you will rue the day, Superman. That kind of spiel. And, he has that evil laugh. And then, of course, Superman goes to check on Lois, and Lois ends up kissing him. And it's like one of those things where again it plays into the conflict where Clark wants to be with Lois, but Lois wants to be with Superman, so it's kind of has that conflict. And then of course by the end of the film, Lois ends up being Clark's friend while also being Superman's lover in a sense. So you have that, and I would have the movie end with Clark in the alleyway, like he's running, he takes off his shirt revealing the Superman symbol, and he flies off. And then after that, the last scene of the film is that they bring in Metallo's destroyed, body. And Lex has the lab coat on, and he's saying, well, that didn't work, but there's always a plan B. And then you see a quick glance of Superman's blood on Metallo, and then that's how I would end Man of Steel. What did you guys think of it? Did you like it? Did you not? Tell me down below. And you know what? That about wraps it up for this rewrite. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Many more rewrite vids to come in terms of the DCEU. And yes, that about does it. Thank you guys for watching. This is the Austinator signing out. Take care, guys.